Hello, everybody, and welcome to our video series on making sustainability actionable in sourcing and procurement. In this video series, we explore the different dimensions of the procurement operating model and what you can do to ensure that sustainability is embedded for lasting success. Today, we speak with David McClintock, Marketing Director of Ecovadis, to address the technology dimension of the operating model and to learn how tools and data can enable procurement to drive sustainable sourcing practices. David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Fabian.
Perfect. So we have already talked to Thomas about the role of leadership, but today we really want to talk about technology and what it can do for people to really make sure that sustainability is more than just a buzzword. And so as part of this interview series, I figured it would be great to speak to you as a representative of Ecovadis, because I think in absence of a standard, you are, for me, kind of the standard in the market and the leader in the space. And so that's why I'm really happy to have you today. And what I wanted to ask you is really to understand from your perspective, why do you think technology is important when tackling sustainability and procurement?
So I think, first of all, procurement is in sort of a digital transformation, right? So they're trying to get everything online and in front of the buyers so that they can make their decisions. And so if sustainability is in the middle of a similar trend, so that everything is being digitized, we're actually trying to measure sustainability now. We have assessments of suppliers or risk mapping that come back with figures. So trying to track this at scale across tens of thousands of suppliers, whether it's an assessment result or whether it's a risk score of 20, 30, 40,000 suppliers for a large multinational, it's impossible to do without a digital platform. And even I would say, spreadsheets and email are not scaling to this level. So you really need a dedicated platform so that you can connect those in a coherent way and make it easy enough for the buyers and for the suppliers to understand their role. And when they're disclosing information, how it gets transformed and how that data is integrating into the procurement decisions that their buyers that they already have those relationships with every day are now affecting those procurement decisions and the selection process and maybe even the contracting and negotiation. So all of that has to play, in our view, has to take place digitally, because we're now quantifying sustainability and we're putting it into a very quantified procurement process. So the only way to do that at scale is with a digital platform.
And you already hinted now at the risk scores, the financial risk scores, I think is something that everybody has used for decades. Now, sustainability metrics is a little bit younger, even though you guys have also been around for, I think, like over 15 years now.
Yes, we had our 15-year anniversary recently.
See, perfect. And so why do you think sustainability metrics are the next important or right thing that people should actually get behind? Because I think they're still not quite as established as the financial risk scores.
I completely agree. And this is, also maybe still a subject of debate within the sustainability community, is how you measure, what are the things we're going to measure? Are we going to agree on standards and alignment? But just more generally, as your question is, why are metrics a good way? Trying to quantify that performance in several different ways is essential, so that you kind of remove ambiguity and you make the decision processes more sort of airtight in a way, because many purchasers are not experts in sustainability. So they need a reliable indicator that they can use. They need reliable indicators they can use to manage those decisions that they're trying to influence. So for example, in addition to the core sustainability metrics themselves, such as, carbon emissions or GHG emissions that are being emitted by a specific supplier, you can aggregate that. But you also could have things like workplace accidents or, diversity metrics, training on those topics, or, a whistleblower activity that's happening in the sort of ethics realm. So there are many core metrics for the underlying criteria that we measure in sustainability, but also they're the sort of program metrics. So you can measure the maturity of a supplier on sustainability management systems, right? So do they have a sustainability management system? How mature is that management system? How ready are they to improve that management system and eventually do better over time? You can't do that without a metric. Similarly, for sustainable procurement, you want to know how mature that program is and how it's progressing over time, how much you have, or do you have all of your risk spend covered with an assessment, for example, or all of your critical suppliers? So there are a number of metrics that you really, if you don't have them, if you're not metrifying your program, you're not going to know how you're making progress, and you're not going to know when you're succeeding, and you're not going to know when those decisions are really influenced at the right level. So that's where we're big fans of metrics.
You said an interesting thing now around the maturity of organizations and how that might differ. So I think one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, like, where do you think is a good starting point for organizations? And is there anything that people can do alone and others that might be better be done as a community? Because I think especially in sustainability, there's like individual communities, like the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, for example, where Thomas, who we talked to in another video, is the founder, or like Together for Sustainability on a more industry level. So what is your take on that? Where should people start, and what can they do by themselves, and where is it maybe better to go?
Yeah, so the starting point for sustainable procurement would depend greatly on the size of the company, or even just sustainability engagement itself. But let's look at sustainable procurement and very large companies. Of course, there are many industry groups already that are trying to get companies together on a pre-competitive basis to and pursue sustainability in the supply chain. And there's a very good reason for that. It's because it makes it much simpler for the suppliers to engage, right? If a supplier has to do a bespoke questionnaire or response or different metrics for every single different customer that they serve, it becomes an unmanageable burden for them. And this is why consolidating through industry collaborations is really effective. So oftentimes the place to start is to look and see if there's such an existing industry collaboration in your industry, if you're looking to establish or improve your sustainable supply chain program. But once you get into the details of it, if you're a large company, you're going to look at, okay, I need my exec team actually on what our corporate sustainability goals are and how our procurement needs to align with that. If we've made net zero commitments that include the value chain, you need to have it budgeted and understood and staffed appropriately. So that's the first place I think to start. And then understanding, what tools to buy and or to create or outsource to get the measurements that you need to drive the program forward, measure the progress, and get there. So starting, as a big company, that's one thing. I think there's another starting point for many companies for sustainable procurement, and that is as a participant in a supply chain program, reporting your results to someone else, they're also asking you, what are you doing with your suppliers? Usually the scale is, a bit smaller. If you're a medium-sized company, maybe 500 or 1,000 employees or somewhere in the middle, and not a super giant multinational. So there, hopefully the assessment itself that you're participating in will have some guidance on what expectations are for your company, the industry, or ISIC code, or whatever your category of products that you create. Maybe even the region might have certain expectations that you're sourcing sustainably. How do you do that as a medium-sized company? So our platform is now scaling down well below into companies that are 100 million or more in turnover. This for us is small, but still there was, tens of thousands of companies at that size that are now starting to engage these programs, and finding the digital tools are actually penetrating farther and farther down to smaller and smaller, companies, to medium-sized companies that are able to use the same tools and the same assessments and the same metrics, so that everything aligns within the multi-tiers of the supply chain. So the starting point, start with the industry, and then start with the assessment that you're getting from your customers. And I think that's going to kind of set the tone for how you approach sustainable procurement.
Yeah, and I think especially things like in Germany, for example, the Sustainable Supply Chain Act, or the Supply Chain Act,
Yes.
They will continue to drive the need for that, for people to really be like, oh, I need to get onto this. So therefore, I think we would see probably more of that. So now my final question for you is, when we think about sustainability and measuring the progress, then it's sometimes a little bit of a backwards view, right? So it's like sometimes a little bit like looking in the rear view mirror. So now, how can we use sustainability metrics, for example, or technology overall, to drive the behaviors forward looking?
So I think the key word here is the integration, the ecosystem. So we're a part of an ecosystem where there are other digital technology suppliers to the procurement teams that provide, the procure to pay suite of tools, integrating those, indicators, the sustainability metrics that we've been talking about into the processes across the procurement workflow is really essential. And some industries may have more emphasis in one area or another, but it includes things like, your supplier selection process. Often this is maybe ad hoc or it's written in a document, but it's becoming more digitized. And if you can set a score target or that, you have to have participated in an assessment, that's one way to integrate that in. When you get to kind of the tenders or RFP, RFX type of process, a lot of those are already automatically calculating a score with different weights. Add in sustainability metric with a weighted score. And that kind of removes a lot of ambiguity for the buyer, and employing that procurement policy to say it's worth 15% or 20%. That automatically kind of influences their behavior because they have to select the best scoring suppliers. Similarly, as you go through the process, the contracting could also include clauses that say you need to be assessed or you need to have a certain score performance or maybe a progression of score performance over time. That way, really, you're engaging over time. I think contracting is also becoming very digital. So you could probably program that in maybe if you're really advanced on contracting. And then lastly, the sort of supplier relationship management systems are very advanced nowadays. They have a similar scoreboard where you can pull together the different performance on, price on time delivery and so forth, and sustainability, right? So that I think that integration is what's really causing the influence to become more systematized across the procurement workflow.
Yeah. And I like integrations because, as you said, it takes away that burden of doing it manually, right? Then it just becomes a little bit more consistent, which is funny enough, one of the other videos that we want to do. And you also talked about ecosystems, and that's going to be the final video of the series, because I think we talked about these communities beforehand, and I believe that is a big driver in this particular space for organizations to progress. So thank you very much, David, for your time. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for the opportunity, Fabian. Really, really enjoyed it.
Perfect. And to the audience, please have a look out for the other videos on the different dimensions of the operating model. And thanks for tuning in today.